So we're now going to move to Mariam. She's a feminist researcher from Georgia. Thank you so much for being on, Mariam. Would you be able to tell us something about the situation with gender identity in your country, and how did you realize it was a threat to women and girls, and who's promoting or opposing it?
If I were to describe this country in terms of its politics, for example, I would say it's this very weird mix of conservative, because 80+% of the population is Orthodox Christian, 10% is Muslim, and the rest is just atheist or other religions. So we kind of have that going on. And then the people in my generation are a bit more progressive and, you know, more into social causes like feminism, things like that. So oftentimes there's this conflict between these sides. And because of that, it kind of gets difficult to have any agreement. I think my generation is more into feminism because we've had this influence of the West on us, because we've grown up with all these Western ideas, shows, etc., more than the generations before us, and, you know, the internet and everything. So it's kind of made this impression on us, let's just say. But there is still a bit of our generation that is still a bit into the more conservative ideas, because of course there is.
Are people allowed to be lesbian or gay in Georgia?
Thing is, they are, but there's this whole thing of, again, conservative people are very against that, because a lot of them think it's some kind of mental issue. I know some people that actually think that. And again, in my generation, it's a bit less terrible, I guess, of a thing, a bit less looked down upon, a bit less of a thing that people will make fun of.
In Western Europe and the United States, and actually pretty much the whole of South America, the idea that men, if they decide they have a gender identity, they like wearing a dress or something, they're allowed to say that they're women, and that's now starting to be the law in our countries. But yes. I guess your country is quite conservative, so maybe, is that happening or not?
There was this one law with, you know, the discrimination, I think, where it stated in the purpose of the law that the protected groups were like sex, race, etc., and gender identity was in there. So I guess you could say it is getting there in the law, but we don't recognize change. Well, we generally don't accept changing the sex. But this month, we have had the first case of our public registry actually allowing a trans woman to change to a woman. And trans women generally have been a bit more active than trans men in that regard, demanding the change.
Wow, so it's starting to happen. And are you,
yes,
Mariam, are you in any feminist organizations, or, I mean, how did you become involved in, how did you hear about Women's Human Rights Campaign or gender identity, any of this?
Well, I'm frankly saying completely independent. Just happens to be, well, first off, happened to be on Reddit and saw all this stuff about, you know, J.K. Rowling and all the feminist subreddits getting banned and everything, and then happened to then go into well, Discord and other spaces where there were radical feminists, and that's how I started. And that was how I learned of this organization campaign, you know. And when I came across, women's human rights campaign, I knew I just had to sign it, the declaration, I mean, because at that point I had seen enough things that were wrong with how women are treated worldwide. So that was how I joined.
Yeah, that's so amazing. It's fantastic. It's just brilliant with the internet that we can join together and we can link, even though it might be there aren't many people like you who you know in real life.
Yes.
So we're less alone. So quite a few of Women's Human Rights Campaign internationally are women they're the only one in their country. So
I am not sure if I would be the only one. It's just that I don't know many people because I'm generally an introvert, and this pandemic isn't helping it.
Yeah, absolutely. But so it is interesting that you've sort of thought things through, and it's based on your knowledge and understanding of the world. You're thinking this is a sort of sensible way of analysing it, this sort of gender critical position in favour of women's rights, and not accepting this.
Oh.
Yeah, well, you're doing.
So,
keep going.
Can I say?
Yeah.
I basically come from a country where gendered violence is still a huge problem. Yes, we've had some campaigns against it and everything, and some of those campaign ads have been attacking men for their masculinity and that expression of the violence against women, but I don't really think it has changed much. Maybe it's a bit more talked about, but people still don't do much if that happens.
Yeah. Do you have women's organizations in Georgia that are strong and work for women? Can you tell us about them at all?
Well, the sad thing is most of women's organizations have some form of trans rights activism going on. So I'm not sure if I could talk about them because it kind of takes away from the issues that women face here to be, protecting the trans people, because again, self-ID is dangerous and the spaces that women have are very, very precious.
Yeah.
And for a country that also routinely looks down up on women, it's a very bad situation.
Do you have get drag on television?
I guess you could say we have situations where men in comedies, for example, dress up as women, but it's not purely drag in that sense. It just happens to be a male actor that dresses as a woman. There is nothing else to it.
Yeah.
And I remember when, you might remember Conchita. When he was popular, he was the laughing stock, let's just say, around here. And we don't exactly look at gay men or women that kindly. But we did make the movie called And Then We Danced, which is about a gay couple, well, or like a gay men's experiences, and there is another man he has some interaction with. And it's funny to think that the gay men were the first to get this kind of representation and not women,
Yeah.
Kind of tells how women are looked at. There is also the issue of surrogacy, since we are one of the few countries that actually have it legal. Understandably, we are one of the hotspots, just like Ukraine. there was this couple that wanted to use surrogacy to have as many children as possible. Neither of the couple were, citizens or native to this country. And sorry, but that is a huge violation of any rights women have.